There's always going to be a breaking point for everybody, all of us, But what we want to do through training is continue to move that curve to where that breaking point is further and further down the road, which allows us to remain more capable under more chaos.
Welcome to the Second Plan A podcast, where we take hard-earned lessons from the mats and convert them into tools for navigating life's challenges. And boy, do we have plenty. I'm Amber Hoover. I'd rather stick to the plan.
I'm Ryan Hoover, and I wish you'd just stick to the plan.
So today we are moving on to our second Plan A. That's just not in the cards, as my car basically went into self-destruct mode today. And so here we are at the center, getting our podcast done. Waiting on AAA. It's going to be a good time, you guys. All right. On this episode, we are putting stress on display. God, I did not write this in the last 5 seconds, but boy, is that true. Often depicted as a villain, stress is frequently referred to as something to avoid and decrease, but in actuality, it can be your biggest strength, but still also your biggest weakness. We'll talk about when stress is to your benefit and where it can contribute to your downfall, on the mats and off. This might be too real, you guys. You look calm. Maybe too calm. Should I stress you out a little bit? Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. These jokes were a lot fun. I know you don't think I'm funny.
I know you're not funny.
But I did have some funny jokes in here, but they were funnier before, the stress of this day actually became a thing.
Okay.
Anyway,
I will take your word for it.
You're going to have to. Back in 1908.
Oh, good.
Simpler
times.
Honestly, maybe. Two psychologists, Yerkes and Dodson, found that performance increases with arousal or stress, but only to a point. And after that, it drops off. They actually studied this with Japanese mice.
As one does.
And apparently the Japanese house mouse is also called a dancing mouse.
Okay.
Which has nothing to do with the episode, but I wanted to include it.
Sounds right.
Yep. So there's actually a lot of controversy over what came to be termed the Yerkes-Dodson Law, because it really just jumped from this experiment to a law within the literature that referenced it pretty quickly. But today there's more research. It's widely considered a part of the optimal arousal theory. So the Yerkes-Dodson Law, or YDL, is depicted as a bell curve, or they refer to it as an inverted U all the time, but it's a bell curve, where low arousal, low stress corresponds with low productivity. And then there's an optimum level of arousal that corresponds with high productivity. But then as you get further on the arousal or stress scale, that corresponds back to a lower point of productivity. So the curve shape actually depends on the individual and the difficulty of the task, but that's essentially the pattern that it follows. And where I want to start is, what does stress look like at different levels in classes? Like on the mat, where do we see stress? How do we add stress? And what does that look like in different tasks? So for me, who teaches a lot of foundation classes, stress is very simple to add to people. It can be as simple as having them close their eyes before the attack that we've drilled for the last 20 minutes comes on. It might be having them do sprawls before the attack comes on. It might be having them spin. It might be having them do a different shoulder tag, a different thing, and then the stimulus comes from nowhere, that sort of thing. And that's just for most people, a pretty low introduction of stress. When you think about stress, as it relates to self-defense, that could be literally the stress of fighting for your life. So the fact that you're a little winded, or that you did 3 burpees before somebody tried to choke you, is a little bit different.
I mean, I'm not surprised at all that you have no problems adding stress to people. This is not even a little bit shocking to me.
Oh, good.
I mean, stress is relative, right? And we're talking about a training environment. And I think where this law kind of comes in and why it matters for what we do is when you're on that kind of lower end, where there's really no real growth happening, right? It's literally, we're here, but we're not being challenged in any way. We're not being pushed in any way, whether that's physical, mental, emotional, whatever. And so starting to layer based on somebody's physical fitness or emotional fitness or mental fitness or technical proficiency, the thing that I found when I was initially kind of looking into this law for a couple of things that I'm working on now was the idea of putting people in a position to where they're dealing with stress, they're dealing with high heart rates, they're dealing with fatigue, fear, whatever it is, and they're not necessarily remaining calm, but they're remaining capable. And I think that's where in our industry we get it wrong sometimes. Because if you look at it from a practical standpoint, when we're talking about self-defense, you mentioned like fighting for your life. Well, fighting for my life or the life of people that I care about or whatever may require me to have the mentality of I'm going to rip your limbs off of your body.
Not a calm thought.
Right.
Yeah.
I cannot be calm and also think I will murder this person if that's what I have to do. And so being able to push that threshold of stress and all the things that come with that and remain capable, I think is where this law is super important for what we do, and we layer that based on time on the mats, based on personal experiences, that kind of thing. We have people spar day one, when they come in the door, and there are ways to gradually add stress to that. But right from jump, if you've never sparred before and all of a sudden it's your first night, it's like, holy crap. And so on that low end, maybe it is remaining calm, not freaking out. But on the higher end, as you start to develop skills and you start to get layers of stress added to it, I think it's more about remaining capable under levels of stress that may cause other people to deteriorate and shut down. When you look at the bell curve for the Yerkes-Dodson Law, on the extremes is where performance fails, basically. Your capabilities drop off. But I think, and everybody has a top end of that threshold. I think we can continue to raise it. It's like, all right, well, my PR for a bench was whatever it is today, but that doesn't mean that it's necessarily topped out.
Yeah. It's shifting the entire curve further and further out. Because so if today my max bench is 100, then today when I try to do 110, 115, I'm more at risk of injury. Like that's not going to be a good performance.
Right.
And then when I am more capable, 110, 115, the entire curve shifts over.
Right.
And so that makes a lot of sense in terms of pressure and stress. What happens at the extreme ends, do you think? Like if more on the extreme end of the high arousal, high stress, in my mind, that I kind of connect it into like fight, flight, freeze, all of that kind of stuff. You're more on the freeze side of things where you're not functioning.
Yeah. The way that I envision this, especially for what we do, is like, and I think I've talked about this before, but like when you heat treat steel, so when you apply heat to steel, I'm talking like really high heat, you can harden it, you can make it more durable. We do this with our knives, and my dad and my granddad both were machinists and had their own companies and made a lot of steel parts and that kind of thing. So I was around this for a long time. Not enough to be able to speak on it intelligently, but I understand the basic principle of you apply heat to a material, and done at the right heat for the right amount of time, you strengthen it, you make it harder. Too much heat, too much time, or too much heat too fast, and you make it brittle. So what was once now a strong metal, a strong material, can now break with just a little bit of stress added to it. And I think we are similar in that when we hit that optimal phase of, whether it's pressure, energy, time under tension, whatever, at some point we all have a threshold where we push too far past that, we can break down, whether that's physical or mental or emotional. And I think for what we do at higher levels, we're always trying to move that curve for people. There's always going to be a breaking point for everybody, all of us, But what we want to do through training is continue to move that curve to where that breaking point is further and further down the road, which allows us to remain more capable under more chaos. And so that's where, with what we do, like if you look at a black belt test, for example, and people have heard me say this plenty of times, every black belt test is different because every black belt is different. And so in that test, what I'm looking to do is I'm trying to find where that threshold is for each individual, because it's not going to be the same for everybody. Certain people in that group, maybe it's physical, maybe it's emotional that I'm trying to push the threshold on. It's the best example I think is Daniel and what we did with him, where we brought in these giants to fight like end of day 3. And because I knew that physically there was nobody else that could really push him the way that he needed to be pushed. And I wanted to see, not just for me, but really for Daniel's sake, that if we pushed him physically and we started to kind of break into that emotional toughness thing where, he's probably never experienced, like, I'm being overwhelmed, I'm being overpowered, I'm tired, then what?
I'm stuck under a giant dude who's crushing me.
Yeah, who I can't just
bench press
power
off
out of, I can't out athletic, I can't whatever. And so finding that threshold without breaking, without putting too much heat that it becomes brittle, I think is where good coaching really, really matters. It's easy to break people. It's easy to apply too much heat, to the steel and make it useless. I work with professional athletes for years now, and in their world, they are high level. This is a different world. And if I allowed my ego just to smash them, I could, because they're coachable. They're going to do what I ask them to do.
Yeah. And they're used to 20-second bursts with 2-minute rests.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So it's easy to push somebody past that point. I think good coaching is continuing to push them to that point as a way to get them to move what that point is.
Are you thinking about, like, if you're picturing it in your head, you're moving to that point and then just pushing a little further, giving a little bit of an experience of the other side to help them? I guess stress inoculation as a term to put this together.
It's lifting to failure. It's not something that you should be doing every day.
Right.
Hard sparring, it's not something that you should be doing every day, but it should be a piece of what you're doing at some point. The thing becomes, all right, well, what is that point and when and how often, and that's where good coaching really matters, because it's you push the wrong person to failure too often or too fast or whatever, and you may never see them again, and then that's not good coaching. Understanding that the bell curve for Yerkes-Dodson, I've been calling the fire curve, because that's what I envision with this. Like, there's an optimal amount of heat that gets people at a high level of performance, motivated to perform at a high level. Too much heat, they're going to burn up. Yeah. Too little heat, they're going to be bored. There's
no incentive. Yes. There's no push. Yeah.
So it's been an interesting exercise for me to really kind of dive into this law and how it applies to what we do.
How much do you love that you have to call it a law? I mean, I guess you don't have to, but it's referred to as a law. But the literature, like, everything about it, there's this caveat of, like, this isn't really a law, but this is what everything says it is. It's like, because we've been saying this is what it is for so long, this is what we're calling it. Yeah. But there's still a lot of, like, there's not a lot of strong research to understand what causes this correlation.
And in the things that I've been writing, like, I reference Yerkes-Dodson, but I basically say this is an adaptation of that, and I'm literally just calling it the fire curve. One, because I think visually it gives a more tangible representation of what we're talking about. People can, once you explain it, it's like, oh, okay, this makes sense to me. But then two, because once you say something is a law, and especially when the research is maybe specious or contested or whatever, I don't want people to get hung up on that part of it. People can say whatever they want. I know for a fact that at very low ends of stimulation, there is no growth. At very, like, high ends of overstimulation, there is no growth. Like, I don't give a shit what anybody says. You can't argue that. Like, that just is what it is. And so I don't want to get caught up in the semantics of, well, is this a law? Is this a what? Who cares?
And there's plenty of research and proof in various studies between animals and humans. And we feel this as business owners, and we see it in other business owners. When things are good, there's no pressure to grow. You tend to stagnate. And then as things happen or whatever, it starts adding some stress and pressure, and you start moving. But then, of course, there's the far extreme where there's just too much, and you
all of a sudden it's overwhelming, and it's like, well, I just throw my hands up. There's nothing I can do. It's out of my hands now. People get to a point where it's just, and this could be business or personal or training or whatever. Everybody's experienced this. Like, if you've lived much of a life at all, everybody's experienced every part of this curve probably multiple times over.
As I was sitting in my car with my flashers on, trying to figure out if AAA was coming, when it was coming, where I'm towing it to, getting sent links to some of the best cars under certain price points in this year. I started to think, where am I right now? How far is this stress pushing me? Which is a fun visualization to have. Okay, I'm going to go a little bit into left field, and then we'll bring it back. But while you were talking about heat treating knives, I was thinking about, I can't remember what I was making for you, but I had to get the sugar water boiled at this right temperature so that it would do the thing it was supposed to do. And if I left it in too long, it wouldn't. And too early, take it out, it doesn't form the right consistency. So we see that curve in baking as well. And one of the interesting things that I found when I was looking up YDL research, it kind of went down a little bit of a rabbit hole into like managerial psychology. So we're kind of back around to like manipulating people, understanding that they need a little bit of stress. And one of the research papers was about construction noise and how if there's a little bit of noise, people aren't productive. If there's a lot of noise, people aren't productive. But if there's this medium level of noise, it's this sweet spot where they can still perform. And I guess it's similar to like white noise, where it's loud enough that it's noticeable, but not so loud that it's overpowering.
I think everybody at some point has experienced this. I'll use quiet just as an example. When things are quiet, when things are slow, when things are stagnant, whatever, there's just a real lack of motivation, whether it's personal or whatever. As humans, we need a certain level of fire, a certain level of stress to push us to be productive,
right?
To be functional, useful, whatever. And I've been a business owner for a long time now, and humans, generally speaking, will work to the level of an expectation. And so as a leader, a coach, an owner, whatever, it's important to understand that everybody's level is going to be different. And I need to know how much fire I can apply to certain people to get a desired result. Some people thrive with higher heat levels. I mean, it just is, some people are quickly overwhelmed by stress and whatever. So you got to figure out, as a coach, as a business owner, whatever, you have to be the thermostat and the thermometer. You have to be able to read the temperature in the room and know how to adjust. Is it too much? Is it not enough?
Well, in a coaching environment, you have to do that too. The teenagers on the floor, the 78-year-old who's seen combat, 25-year-old who just graduated college.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's the same for business owner.
Yeah.
Because you have those same, like even here, we have a teenager that works for us, and then we have
25.
Is that a Gen Z? What is that?
I think so. Yeah.
A Gen,
young or older Gen Z.
A Gen Alpha, a Gen Z, a millennial. So I think pretty much all walks of life. You're going to have to figure out how to. And then you got personalities within those, right? Generations aren't monolithic,
right.
But there are definitely commonalities and differences between, and then so understanding that, and then understanding the personal proclivities within those generations to figure out, all right, well, this person can handle me turning this up a little bit. This person will completely shut down on me if I do it, or they can handle it, but I've got to do it slowly,
right?
And training is the same. When we decided we were not going to do hard ready after this year, the big thing was now, okay, well, now what? Which is what led me to this. Was I was trying to figure out, all right, well, what's the next thing? How do we improve upon what we've done? Because I don't like what I found in myself was with hard ready. So it was year 10, and it's like, all right, well, I feel like this one was our best one ever.
Yes.
However, just because something is the best doesn't mean it can't be better, And
however, it's just a fancy bug.
In the current state of the way that it's set up, I felt like the only way to really improve it was to revamp it all together.
Change it. Yeah.
Change it,
I agree.
mix it up. Because what I found was I had gotten too comfortable. It was just too easy to be like, all right, well, let's go ahead and figure out what our 10 coaches are for next year. And the same people would have come and, great, awesome. But if we wanted to enhance the experience for everybody, we wanted to keep people growing, we wanted to be able to add a little bit more flame to the experience, then we needed to figure out how to do that. And that's what led me to looking at all sorts of things. And then this idea of progressively being able to take somebody. So what Hard Ready is, it's 10 different instructors teaching pretty much whatever they want within, the overall kind of concept of most of these people are here for self-defense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so what I wanted to do was look at, all right, well, what if we took a 4-day course and we had the same coaches teaching every day, but they were progressively adding a little heat as we go. We establish a baseline on day 1, and then we start turning it up just a little bit and just a little bit and just a little bit until day 4. It's like, all right, let's really turn this up and see where that threshold is for people. How can we build a 4-day program and from day 1 to day 4 see real progress, see real growth, and push people maybe just to a point or just beyond where they thought they could go, And so you've got same 4 or 5 coaches teaching every day, but each one of them is teaching a progression. Each one of them is teaching literally from day 1 to day 4 how to get better every day.
It's kind of like how we do in classes. Like 3 weeks ago, I was teaching wrist release and you stood there and grabbed their hand and released it. And now we're entering into underhooks off of a wrist release and we're doing arm drags from our back and getting to our feet and that sort of thing.
Right.
Okay.
But this is going to put people from, a raw material on day 1 to hopefully a finished blade on day 4, going through the process of building that base, raw materials, putting a little heat on it, forming into a shape, and then kind of honing things and seeing where we are on day 4, pressure testing it. Let's see if that blade will cut, kind of thing.
Okay, so for those of you who were at Hard Ready 10 and you got my email, I teased that this podcast would have a little bit about the next evolution. I had no idea you were going to get so much about it. Are you willing to drop the name?
Yeah, it's Foundry, and it's stylized in a very specific way. Foundry being, Foundry is where you take raw materials, usually metals, you apply heat to them, and you put them into a shape that you want, and then you have a finished product at the end, right? And so that's the idea for the course is, all right, everybody's showing up as they are, you're the raw material, and then you've got these coaches that are tasked with shaping you into what you need to be over the next 4 days. And then the name is stylized specifically found with a colon. So found is isolated.
Okay.
Because we're kind of finding you where you are. And then the RY is separated out because it's the resolve plus you. And so this idea of, all right, raw materials day 1, finished product day 4. And obviously, if you do this right, nobody's ever finished. But within the context of, what can we actually accomplish in 4 days? And having 4 or 5 coaches, I think we'll probably have 5, working together towards a common kind of finish, as opposed to what we've done in the past where it's, we got 10 awesome coaches, but there's any synergy that happens is accidental.
Well, I was going to talk about that because people ask us every year, did you plan that? And no, we never have.
No.
But fighting is fighting.
Yeah.
And if you're getting the right coaches together who really understand this world and what we're doing here and what we're teaching, you're going to see like a golden thread throughout everything. But and now 10 years later, there are other events similar to what we're doing that have started coming up. But you're taking the next evolution to be, okay, no, we're going to plan this. Yeah. And so you're not just going to leave with
I'm giving something else for people to copy.
Yeah, probably. But rather than having all of these 2-hour sessions that are great and you get a lot of information, it's still separate and disparate, mostly within what you're trying to develop in yourself, and you have to go practice these skills individually.
Right.
You're giving them a full weekend of harmonized training that's going to work together, build on itself, so that you're going to see stark differences from day 1 to day 4.
Yeah, you should be able to see a marked difference in whatever skills you start with on day 1 to pressure testing on day 4. So if we're taking, grappling, as a piece, and there's going to be a very specific progression of that grappling from day 1 to day 4, and striking and, close quarters work, weapons work, whatever. Day 1 to day 4, while each coach has their individual progression that they're going to work on, all coaches are working towards a final progression. So if, let's say, Mike is going to do a striking progression throughout the weekend, and then Mike will have his own test.
Okay.
And that will follow through for every coach. But then there'll be a cumulative test where we all kind of come together and see how it all works in this final test.
The final forged in, can't say that, but okay. I'm excited for that. I think that's going to be a great evolution. It's going to solve, I don't want to say problems. The way Hard Ready was running is fine, and you can still get a lot of, growth and success from weekends like that. Sure. Onus is going to be on you to go out and really push that. And again, it's not that you would leave out of Foundry whole and complete and like good to go, but you would have developed those skills so heavily over the course of 4 days, they're going to be less perishable as you walk out the door. Yeah. And I think that has a huge advantage, because when you walk out of Hard Ready day 3, most of that information is gone. A couple things might stand out in your mind, 2 or 3 highlights, and that's
you got
great.
Videos to go back and watch.
Yeah, of course. Well, even if you only came out of a weekend like that with 2 or 3 things that were really totally functional for you, absolutely worth it. But yeah, having more of a whole scale change.
Yeah. It'll be much more recognizable to the individual on how to implement this in their current training, and also a much more discernible kind of scale of progress. At the end of Hard Ready, it's like, holy shit, that was a lot, and that was awesome, and I learned so much.
But there's no I improved.
Yeah, it's hard to, like, I believe at the end of this event, people are going to be able to say, I am a better striker. Mm-hmm. I am a better grappler. I am better at clinch work. I am better at de-escalation or pre-contact or whatever. I will be shocked if that's not the case. Yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I think it will change the way that training is done for these kinds of events. It will take people a few years to catch up, because it always does. And then by then we'll be on to the next thing, I
know I had people come up and ask me, they were like, how do you improve on Hard Ready? Like, what's he going to change? And at that point, you hadn't sent me anything. I think you had maybe sent me like a 2-sentence synopsis of what you were thinking. And I was like, he's shown me something. Like, he has an idea. It's real. He's not just like throwing it out there and figure it out later. Like, he has an idea. But yeah, no, that's not my skill set either. I am not the ideation person. I have gotten the documents now and am executing. Yeah, and honestly, we haven't had a chance to actually talk about it, because as you all mostly know, this is when we talk to each other. This hour podcast, and then maybe like 30 minutes before and after, trying to get some stuff done. But talking through it, I mean, it's all stuff I've seen, but talking through it brings it a lot more to life. Yeah. So I'm excited.
Yeah,
they should be excited.
It's going to be good, and it's going to be unlike anything else that's out there that I've seen anyway. Mm-hmm. Maybe somebody's doing it, but I haven't seen it if they are. And even if they are, we'll do it better.
Okay. I feel weird jumping back into this whole YDL curve idea.
But that's what it's about. Yeah. That's the weekend.
Yeah.
Like, it literally is. We're going to, that curve is the weekend. Day 1 is going to be that very low threshold baseline. Let's see where everybody is. Let's introduce you to kind of where we're wanting to go with this. Days 2 and 3 are going to be that optimal level of performance. That's going to be the top end of that curve. And then day 4, we'll start pushing to where that drop off happens. And that'll be a good indicator for us as coaches, but also the participants where their learning has stopped for the weekend and where they still have room to grow. I mean, that's when we talk about tests here, we talk about ready, not ready. I don't like the pass fail thing for what we do. And so I think everybody will come out of that understanding where they are ready and where they're maybe not ready, and they'll have at least a baseline blueprint for how to improve on the things that they're not ready for.
It is very similar to how we've run some black belt tests, but are planning to run the next one in terms of using that scale as a guide for what's going on. Yeah. Okay, I have a question.
Okay.
Hopefully there are other people like me out there that will relate to this. But some personalities, not getting personal or anything, tend to put extra stress on themselves. No one comes to mind off the top of my head, but I know they're out there on top of what's already being applied. And maybe they push themselves into the other side when they don't need to. How do you manage that as a coach?
So, and part of my sessions that weekend will be on stress, how to push that threshold without going too far in that white hot, because all of that is controllable. The stress that we're applying to ourselves is self-induced. I mean, and so learning to set expectations, learning to manage expectations, and I'm talking about for coaches and for students, trainees, athletes. That'll be a part of my session, teaching people how to not necessarily remain calm, but remain capable, not to let the chaos diminish their ability to perform, and whether that chaos is internal or external. So, yeah.
Okay, good. Glad we're clarifying where the chaos is coming from. Okay, I have more on this topic. We're going to save it for another day. We're going to talk about the social facilitation effect. We're going to talk a little bit about how all of this connects to a lot of what we talked about before in terms of using social cues to determine behavior and actions and that sort of thing, and understanding what you accept and what you don't. But for now, that's our look at the edge of pressure. Working title. I think we're going to keep it. If you enjoyed this discussion, please leave us 5 stars, follow, share, subscribe. If you didn't enjoy this podcast, comment, tell us how unprofessional our podcasting studio is. That'd be fantastic. And yeah, thanks for listening to Second Plan A, and we look forward to growing with you next time.
Thanks, everybody.